How many authors in history have there been who have tried to summarize that idea with a story or a novel or a series of novels or their whole life's work and not come up with anything nearly as powerful?
Better than food, man.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. Get that coffee. Very full. White shirt. And we're good. I also like to live dangerously. Really quick, the to be read video, wherein I list all the books I plan to read in 2024, is now up for patrons on Patreon. Please check it out using the link below to see everything I'm going to read this year. And everything I'm overdue on as well. So that's embarrassing, but it's there. And also there is a list for my Amazon bookshop. If you buy anything from there, then the show gets a kickback, and I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much for your support. All right, moving on. All right, what have I got for you today? Today is A Terrace in Rome by the French author Pascal Quignard, published in the year 2000, translated by Douglas Pennock and Charles Ray. A Wakefield Press publication. Oh yeah. I am sponsored by them in that they send me books for free sometimes. As they did with this one, they sent me this one for free. However, I requested this one specifically. And once again, Wakefield Press delivered. And they're wonderful, and Mark is awesome, and I highly recommend that you check them out if you haven't already. This was a recommendation from friend and poet Kit Schluter. Thank you very much, man. Really appreciate it. I asked him for his 3 top books under 150 pages, and this was the only one of the authors on his list that I hadn't read. I'd never heard of Pascal Quignard, ever. Considering the nature of this book, I'm very surprised. Somehow, Quignard got away from me. This is a brief melancholy adventure about a 17th century engraver by the erudite and enigmatic French author Pascal Quignard, who won the Prix Goncourt in 2002 and won the Académie Française for this one in 2000. As the translator Douglas Pennock writes in the introduction, Quignard has developed an unusual form of fiction made from fragments and reflections. And he also wrote that Quignard is admired for the subtlety of his extensive scholarship and broad culture that embrace literature, history, music, philosophy, and painting from Greco-Roman times until our own. These provide the anchor for his meditations on the great topics of Western thought. His inwardness ranges over the abstractions of love, sex, loss, death, time, and art. Right up my alley. Hopefully up yours. Quignard himself, in an interview with the fantastic Chilean interlocutor CRISTIÁN WARNKEN, who did a very famous interview with Roberto Bolaño, I've linked to the Quignard interview below, compared some of his writing to Baroque suites, right? These little fragmentary movements. It was a different book of his that he was discussing, but I think it applies to this one too. Unfortunately, there's no English subtitles, it's all in Spanish. Well, it's actually, the conversation is in French, but the subtitles are in Spanish, so if you speak Spanish or you can get by, then check it out. But or if you speak French, parfait. That's what A Terrace in Rome is like. It seems to be narrated by an art historian of some sorts, or somebody who is knowledgeable on the very esoteric history of this artist. I don't think we ever figure out who it's narrated by. But that's what A Terrace in Rome is like. A short but very strong piece of magnificent classical music with a whole range of emotions. And beautifully done, beautifully performed. Flawlessly, really. It doesn't give all of itself to you at all. It actually gives very, very little of itself. But it's like poetry, and we'll come back to that later. A Terrace in Rome is primarily about loss and reflection, and life lived acknowledging loss and reflecting on it for the rest of one's days. Haunted by it, obsessed by it, and allowing it to infiltrate every activity that one partakes in for the remainder of their life. One can be so shaped by one's loss that one can become defined by it. And defined is a very good word. Defined like Mome's face is defined in the book. Defined like the piece of brass is defined by the various techniques of impacting it. One can become defined, shaped by one's loss. This is the case of Geoffrey Mome, a 17th century French engraver who was apprenticing in Belgium, who, after having a passionate, highly erotic relationship with a girl in Bruges, is severely wounded in an act of revenge by her fiancé, who finds them together and hurls acid onto his face. He's disfigured permanently, and the girl is no longer in love with him. But she does save his life, in a way, even though she's destroyed it in another. For Mome, of course, it's not only physically destructive, it's psychologically destructive. And speaking of, your life may not be as hard as Mome's, but for a lot of us right now, times are tough. They've been increasingly difficult over the last few years. And we often need methods of dealing with the adversity we face, whether it's physical, emotional, spiritual, or psychological. There are some great methods I prefer. For example, limiting your alcohol consumption is a great one. And quitting smoking, if you do it all, just don't even do that. Getting enough food, eating properly, weight training, some people like meditation or yoga. Both can be great. I love hot yoga, especially. Another great method is therapy, which is why I'd like to tell you about the sponsor of today's video, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and accessible, which is helpful because finding a therapist could be potentially difficult depending on the slim options in your area, especially if you live somewhere rural, you know, but in which case I'm kind of jealous, but you know, and good for you. But yeah, it might be difficult for finding a therapist, especially one that you connect with, you know. But this is why BetterHelp is helpful, because you can go anywhere in the world, and as long as you have an internet connection, you have access to your therapist. And they make finding a therapist easy because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out some questions online, BetterHelp can match you with a therapist in as little as just a few days. And it's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. There's a link below in the description. It's betterhelp.com/BTF. Clicking on that link helps support the show, but it also gets you 10% off your first month with BetterHelp, so you can check them out and see if it works for you. And I sincerely hope it does. And because finding a therapist is a little bit like dating, if you don't initially fit with your therapist, which is a common thing in therapy, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional cost anytime, without having to worry about insurance or who's in your network or anything like that. So if you're struggling right now, and let's be honest, who isn't? Please consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Go ahead and click on the link below in the description or go to betterhelp.com/BTF. And thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. He flees, relating to the reader, I was leaving to take my poor song elsewhere. Just as there is a music of damnation, there is a painting of damnation. And the sentence immediately after that is, the acid for etching is stranger than a color. So yeah, Mohm is excommunicated from the life he knew, wandering Europe through the Pyrenees and beyond until he settles in Rome, where he creates etchings on his terrace, a terrace in Rome. I mean, you couldn't call it Mohm in Rome, right? That's just the wrong tone. Brass etchings made intentionally with acid, as well as mezzotints. He might make the mezzotints at a different point in the book, but... Mezzotints are a very interesting process of intaglio printmaking, carving out lines in metal. Really, really beautiful process. I've linked to a video on how you do it below. It's really interesting. It's very arduous, very, very... It was current for the time that he was alive in the book, in the 17th century, in the 1600s. And but so what he's doing is actually modern, but of course to us it's like virtually archaic, though people do still do it, and it's incredible, and you can check it out, the process, in this video that I've linked below. It's amazing. And this husband and wife, they show you how they do it, and it's cool. The wife takes you through the whole process, and I found myself actually really intrigued by how you do it, and the way she was describing it was so interesting, with like the tops being cut off of mountains, and so you'll see. It's quite cool. I've never done any kind of printmaking like that. I've never experimented with that kind of printmaking technique. I can't. My hands are basically useless for anybody who's seen my handwriting. I'll take my mind over my hands any day. Shit, I'll take my feet over my hands. There's another book I reviewed that this one immediately reminded me of, which was an episode in the life of a landscape painter by the Argentine author César Aira, which was coincidentally published the same year as this one, and I reviewed it years ago, maybe 5 years ago or so, but I'll link to the review below. It tells the story of a German painter, a real life painter, Johann Moritz Rugendas, who travels to Argentina to paint these landscapes. And in the book, he is struck by lightning while on horseback traveling out in the Pampas, these big flat fields. Yeah, he's struck by lightning and then he's dragged by his horse. So he's injured and disfigured, but he still paints. And it's an amazing book, also very short. It's a story of artistic innovation through suffering and endurance through physical pain, physical injury, as is this one. That's about where the comparisons stop. That, and there's actually another character in this book who is a real life landscape painter named Claude Lorrain. In France, they just call him Le Lorrain. The biggest difference between it and Quignard's book is the addition of, aside from the obvious writing styles, they're very different, is the addition of doomed eroticism and sexual obsession in Quignard's. This reflection on the tragedy of the past, which haunts Mohm in so many ways, until it literally tracks him down and finds him and stabs him in the throat. And it's not who you think it is, which it's a great part of the book. It's so brutal. I mean, in so many ways. I mean, it doesn't even, you don't even see, the book does, you know who it is, you know what he does, you know their relationship, but the book doesn't even have to go and illustrate the consequences. I mean, you're kind of left with it, and it's just so, life. Along the way, there are many adventures. Yeah, he meets the French landscape painter Claude Lorrain. 20 of Mom's bizarre erotic mezzoprints are destroyed. After a young man from a wealthy family is unable to obtain an erection and subsequently commits suicide, and the family purchased these MEZZOTINTS and prescribed them to this young man to try and facilitate his virility, and it fails miserably, and so the young man kills himself. And this is given as the historical reason for why a good percentage of his work has been lost or destroyed. It's very tragicomic because Mom's mezzoprints are bizarre. You know, they're strange. They're odd. They're not particularly they're dark. You know, they're like literally too. I mean, they're weird. They're not particularly arousing. They're just darkly sexual. It's an arduous process, after all, creating a mezzotint. It's literally carving lines out of metal. A taxing endeavor, to say the least. It's not something you can just do over the weekend. There's something poetic to the novella, not only in its romantic tone and content, but also in its structure, the way it's written. There's very little actual writing. Huge swaths of time are covered in a sentence or two. It's like poetry, wherein these chasms of space and time are opened up in the form of like a sentence or a handful of words. But these words are so choice and evocative, one doesn't tend to miss the others, right? In this manner, one can move right along while reading it, never bored. It forces one to take it a little bit slower, perhaps. Maybe not forcefully, but it kind of suggests you read it slower, right? As to get everything, as to linger on certain beautiful phrases or passages. It really is a remarkable translation. Hats off to Douglas Pennock. What was and ended brutally. What could have been and was not. These are the elements that plague Mom in the book. Obsession with what could have been follows him into his work. It dogs all of us throughout life. It's very human, it's very much part and parcel of the human condition. This is a powerfully depressing book in a certain sense, as it depicts a man tormented, haunted throughout his life, perpetually by what could have been. There's wisdom beyond description in Quignard's writings. You can tell he's older. I mean, he was born in '48, so he's in his 70s. Consolidated genius is a term I'd apply. For instance, look at the line on page 97. One day, however, Claude began to reply, the landscape painter, "You talk in riddles, and that is irritating for whoever listens to you." Mom responded, "One reaches an age when one no longer meets life but time. One ceases to see life as living. One sees time in the act of devouring life raw. One's heart seizes up. One clings to driftwood just to see a little more of the spectacle bleeding from one end of the world to the other, and yet not fall in." Claude the painter told him that what he was saying was not very clear, even though the sentences he enunciated were correctly constructed. Mom said, "There is an irresistible night in the depths of man. Every evening women and men fall asleep. They sink into that darkness as if it were a memory. It is a memory. Men sometimes believe that they come close to women. They look into the expressions on their faces. They reach out to their shoulders. They return to their bodies every evening, and they lie down by their sides. Yet they do not fall asleep." "I don't understand anything you're saying," replied Claude Gillet. That's Mom speaking to Claude Gillet when Mom is dying. How many authors in history have there been who have tried to summarize that idea with a story or a novel or a series of novels or their whole life's work and not come up with anything nearly as powerful? Brevity is in fact the soul of wit. Shakespeare was correct. But I mean, that's not a line a young person can write with any conviction, at least. That's not a young author's writing, right? Just when it gets too soft or poetic, it drops a line of such immense profundity on you without explaining itself. You're immediately sucked back into the alluring vortex that is this book. And it's not a pleasant experience. It's a painful, violent, often distorted, gorgeous magnificence. Kit called it voluptuous, grotesque, and beautiful. I can't describe it better. Mom begins to deteriorate, but this voyage into death, this deterioration conjures, Artaud, Rimbaud, Baudelaire, L'Autrement, Les Poètes Maudits, the accursed poets, the damned poets, right? Wherein he's kind of occupying some sort of twilight existence, right? Half dead, but in sort of a dream world. Still able to communicate something of his experience, but in a disturbing poetry of which, while evocative and beautiful, only he can fully understand. Better than food. Check it out. Pascal Quignard is one of the greatest authors we currently have walking the globe. So much taught to the reader and so much to contemplate, right? So many doors open to explore in so few pages. It's remarkable. So you should read it. If you're a fan of fantastical literature or the Poètes Maudits, the accursed poets, or saw it even, or the printmaking crafts and art history. And especially if you enjoyed all of that and you enjoyed an episode in the life of a landscape painter by César Aira, get it. Now. Huge bang for your buck. Peter Greenaway could make a beautiful adaptation. You could expand it to 1,000 pages and yet you'd lose something in the expansion. You'd lose all of it in the expansion, I'd argue. You'd be left with a diluted, watered-down narrative. It'd be like taking a beautiful espresso and pouring it into a pitcher of lukewarm water. It'd be miserable. It would just be awful. The destruction of something beautiful. Who taught you to make coffee? This is why we can't have nice things. On that note, coffee time. For those of you who are new, thank you very much for stopping by and watching. I take all the names of the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more per video to the show. I place their names in this mason jar, and for every review I pull out a name, and whoever's name I pull out, I send a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly. And currently the coffee is from Nicaragua. It's one of my favorites. It's absolutely delicious. If you would like to get in on that and help support the show, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. You can click on the link below or go to patreon.com/books-are-better-than-food. The tiers start at $5 per video, but you can put a monthly cap on it so you don't go over budget. And you'll also get access to all the other cool stuff listed below, including the Patron-Only Reviews, of which there's a really good one coming up. And all these reviews ad-free. And international shipping is included. It's not just for folks in the USA. International shipping is included. Thank you very much to all my longtime patrons. Welcome and thank you to all my new patrons. And best of luck to all of you. Thank you so much. Okay, here we go. Eduarda M. Thank you very much, Eduarda. I can't, the coffee, I can't roll my R's right now, I apologize. Thank you very much, Eduarda. I sincerely appreciate it. You're going to receive A Terrace in Rome by Pascal Quignard, plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly. And I hope you love both. Cheers. Well, that's all I've got for you today. Hope you enjoy this book. It's fantastic. Hope you check out Pascal Quignard. He's one of my favorite authors I've come across lately. And please subscribe if you have not already, and hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this. And always remember, bring a book wherever you go. All right. Thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Have a great night. Talk to you soon. Ciao.